Welcome to another episode of Poetic Lines. I'm your host, Elizabeth Lund. In February 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine. People around the globe were horrified by the invasion and by images of Ukrainians fleeing their homeland. As news stories continued month after month, poet and publisher Gloria Mindock channeled her sadness and disgust into one poem after another. In 2023, Glass Lyre Press published those poems in a collection called Grief Touched the Sky at Night. Within weeks, the book attracted international acclaim. Since then, it has won the International Impact Award, the Speak Up Talk Radio Firebird Award, the Independent Press Award, the BookFest Book Award, and numerous awards from the Outstanding Creator Awards. More recently, Gloria received the NYC Big Book Award and the Sam Cornish Award from the New England Poetry Club. Gloria's work is rich with emotional insight, perhaps because she worked for decades as a clinical director and counselor in addictions. Gloria has published 6 books of poems. She is also the founding editor and publisher of Chervana Barbara Press, which has published more than 250 titles since the press began in 2005. Gloria is here today to talk about her book, her commitment to giving voice to the voiceless, and why she thinks it's so important that people remember the injustices and atrocities in the world, rather than simply forgetting. Gloria, welcome to the show. I'm so happy you could join us.
Thank you.
Would you read a poem from your new book?
I will read The Blindfold. Blindfold me so I don't see the damage, the dead bodies or blood on the ground. Wrap the blindfold tightly around my eyes so I don't see the Russian tanks. Puncture my ears so I don't hear the sirens that a missile is coming. Tie my hands together so I can't take a life. God would not want me to do this. Bind my legs so I won't run and flee from my home. Stop my heart from feeling loss, sadness, and grief before it overwhelms me. The soldiers are killing my family and friends, slitting their throats and burning them. I know this. Remove my blindfold, untie my hands, give me my hearing back, give me a weapon.
That is such a powerful poem. It gives me, as the listener, a hint of what it must be like to live in Ukraine during this war. But it's fascinating how the poem turns. At first, the blindfold seems to be almost a comfort or a way of dealing with things. But then there's a twist at the end, and suddenly the blindfold comes off.
I did that on purpose because sometimes when horrible things happen, we don't want to face it. And then reality hits. And when that hits, you have to take the blindfold off and you have to deal with what's happening.
It takes courage to take that blindfold off.
It does. But the people of Ukraine, they're so brave and courageous. It's amazing how they're standing up against Putin.
Laura, you've always described yourself as a poet of witness. What does that term mean to you?
Well, I have always been a poet of witness. I have to speak up for those that have no voice, for those that are in mass graves. They need to have a voice. And for the oppressed in the world, I have always done that for years and years. And actually, I'm not the only one, of course, in this world that speaks up. And I want to bring attention actually to someone. I have the book here. Her name's Alexa Haggerty. And the book is called Still Life with Bones, Genocide, Forensics, and What Remains. And she is in Guatemala with her team exhuming the bodies, the bones there. And I just think it's fascinating. I mean, it's sad too, of course, but the bones, all those people have a story. So she's trying to identify them by forensics. And then giving a story to the bones, to their life. And I just think it's amazing. So there's so many people in the world like that. So being a poet of witness is very important to me to be among people like that. And actually, 4 of my 6 books are all about the atrocities. The first one is called Blood Soaked Dresses, and that's about the Civil War in El Salvador. The second one was I Wish Francisco Franco Would Love Me, and that's about Franco, his wife, and the people. And I watched a lot of testimonies on the internet besides researching in books. The third one is called Whiteness of Bone, and that covered the atrocities in Rwanda, Argentina, Congo, and so many countries. And then, of course, the fourth one is about Ukraine.
It's wonderful that you're part of a community of witnesses. Why do you think it's important to speak for those who don't have a voice or to speak for the bones, as you said earlier?
Well, they deserve to be heard. They're human beings and their life is important. So it's important to give them that voice. Because of that, this world can be a cruel place, but it also can be a great place. We need awareness. And when you bring that awareness, maybe some of this will stop.
There has to be a shift in thought, just as there was a shift in the poem you just read for us.
And that awareness, hopefully, more people will speak out and say they've had enough of this. You know, and it's not only the people in the world, it's all the politics and the government.
Would you read another poem from the book?
This one is called Boots. My boots are dirty, but not from dirt. My boots are heavy, but not from weight. My boots are untied, but not from neglect. My boots are on the road. I did not take them off. My boots are worn by someone else. I did not give. My body is naked. I did not remove my clothes. My dignity remains while the dirt covers me. I love my country. I love my country. I am Ukraine.
Wow, those last few lines are so powerful. Would you read the last five lines again?
My dignity remains while the dirt covers me. I love my country. I love my country. I am Ukraine.
I love the idea that dirt can't cover up someone's dignity or take it away. What remains is always love of country, love of life, and the goodness of the Ukrainian people.
That poem has got a lot of reaction, it seems like, whenever I read it. And I can understand now why it does.
Your book attracted international attention almost immediately after it was published. Why do you think it resonated so much with readers?
Because of the voice in the poem, some of the poems, the strength in them, but also it is the voice of Ukraine, of the people. And I think that's why it received all the attention, that it did.
So many people were grieved when the invasion of Ukraine happened and when the war just seemed to go on and on. How did you decide to write about this subject? What was the genesis of the project?
I think it was, well, Putin's evilness. I mean, the war really started in Crimea in 2014. And again, nothing was done at that time. I can't remember if there were sanctions against Russia. I would have to look it up. But no matter what, enough was not done. And Ukraine, the people in Ukraine, I know they were worried that he was going to, invade their country. It was a matter of time. And of course, that did happen. And then, of course, all the Eastern Bloc countries, are worried too that they're going to end up back under communism. So I think Crimea really started it for me, that I knew I just had to write about it.
How long did it take you to write the poems in this collection?
Took me about 7 months.
Wow, that's fairly quick for writing a book. Poem every day, or was there another pattern?
I never write every day. I wish I could, but that will never happen. I'm a sporadic writer. I can go for months without writing, and then all of a sudden I will start writing like a mad woman. So that happened with this book. I would go days without writing, and then all of a sudden Something would trigger something for me, and then I would start writing, and then I'd probably write about three or four, put them aside, and kind of let them stew in my head for a while, and then go back and edit them. And that's pretty much usually how I work with everything.
What was the first poem you wrote for this collection?
Oh gosh, I would say I Don't Mourn was probably the first one.
Would you read that poem for us?
I don't mourn. I mourn what I throw away, old paintings, photographs, objects, writings. Each thing drifts in the wind, trying to stick to life but can't. Is this me too, trying to hang on? No one has the same memories, same things in possession. Must I give all this up? Ignore me. I don't mourn. Best to close down, shut my eyes tight until darkness is my fate. I can have little funerals daily as I pitch out life. This way, you will never own me. You don't want to anyway. Junk to you. From the grave, hope my things will visit me. I don't want to be alone. Maybe you will sit by stone and talk, carrying in your pocket your favorite thing of mine.
I love the way that ends and the idea of carrying something in your pocket, carrying a favorite memento as if to hold on to something beautiful, something positive from the life you no longer have.
Yes. I mean, when I thought of all the people leaving Ukraine, going into Poland, the women with their children, I thought it must be really hard to leave things behind. I know I'm attached to my stuff. It's really hard. I really need to clean out, but you know, it's still here. So I thought about them and how that must feel to leave everything behind, all that you've known, your life, and go into a foreign country, a different language, different people, and how that must feel. And so that's how that poem came about.
After you wrote that poem, did you know that you would be writing more about this subject?
I would be writing and writing about Ukraine, and I like to spend time. I research everything. I try to read as much as possible, and also talk to people if if I can do that. I know some people in Ukraine. I have friends that are Ukrainian. I have Russian friends. I have a friend that feels he can never go home again. He's a US citizen, but he was raised in Moscow and his family. And I thought about that too, how sad that is, not even to go home and visit. You feel like you can't do that anymore. That's really sad.
You're reminding me of the initial stories that we heard in the news when the war began. And as the war has gone on and on, I think many people have forgotten about that initial exodus and what it means. So the poem is an important reminder of that. The opening poem in the book is wonderful. Would you read that for us?
I ran down 21 flights of stairs to find myself sitting under a tree, branches sheltering me from grief, the wind blowing it somewhere.
That poem is almost like a postcard in some ways because it contains a striking visual image and an intense emotion. And I like the way the poem suggests that grief, like the wind, can push you somewhere you never intended to be.
Yes, and that grief pushing you makes you react because what was happening was a shock. Even though they knew it was coming, probably, it's still a shock and you have to deal with it. So, sitting under that tree, the reality hits and grief hits the whole country. So, then all of Ukraine has to take action.
The collection does a wonderful job of balancing public grief and private grief. How did you find that balance when you were writing?
Well, let me think here. I think that grief is a part of life. We all feel it, whether we lose someone in our life. I mean, think about Ukraine. They were witnessing people being raped and murdered, slaughtered, burned. That, of course, is grief. And grief helps you take action. When things are so horrible like that, you have to take action. Again, it pushes you forward. You have to do something about it. And that balance is there. I mean, all of us deal with grief every day in some way or another. So for me, it was easy. It wasn't really a balance. I mean, I've had grief in my life. I think most of us have, maybe not to the extent what they're going through in other countries, but it's there. I think working as a counselor and social worker for 40 years also has given me a good, strong sense of empathy. I can feel what other people feel and I can write about it. I can put myself very easily in their position and write about it.
That's very evident. Would you read another poem from the book?
I'll read Bandages. And this was actually inspired by 60 Minutes. Two women who were prisoners of war were on the show and they talked about their experience. So when I heard them speak, this poem came about. Bandages. In a Russian prison, she could hear the cries of Ukrainian men being raped. She was pregnant. Her husband did not know. All she wanted was her baby to be born in Ukraine, speaking to her stomach, urging, "Wait, little one." In a prisoner exchange, her baby was born in Ukraine. Another woman, so brutalized, she was not sure she would live, yet she's ready to fight again. Still, she did not want to leave home. Bombed out shell, dried blood in the dirt, wreckage like abstract art, a boot in the road filled with flowers, someone mourning a life, mourning their life. In some villages, every heart stopped beating at once. Can a village survive supported by the beating hearts of only two? Yet the women carry on in the footprints stretched out before them, walking the same path, breathing a different story for a free Ukraine.
That poem was so powerful and evocative because it gives us the news in a very different way. You give us the human element that many people miss when they're watching news segments that are 30 or 60 seconds long.
That's why I'm so glad that 60 Minutes did a story and had those two women on the show. It really gave you an in-depth perspective of what they went through and what was going on in the prison, as well as being exchanged for their freedom. And look at, they went right back out there and, you know, we're going to fight again for their freedom. And that takes a lot of courage. And it was so interesting to hear them speak. I think there are many people in Ukraine like those two women who show such courage and continue to fight. And I'm glad they brought awareness to their story because there are many women fighting in Ukraine besides the men. And I think that deserves attention.
It does deserve attention. And when you mention the word fight, that can mean literal fighting, but in many cases, it also means fighting to maintain your hope and your sense that things can improve. You've captured that as well.
Yes, their resilience is just remarkable in that country. And President Zelensky is really a hero because at first people said, oh, he won't make a good president, his theater background and television history, but he has stepped forward and he is just a hero, remarkable. But I consider all the people in Ukraine remarkable and a hero, not just him because he's the president.
The title of your book is fascinating because you chose Grief Touch the Sky at Night instead of just Grief Touch the Sky. Why did you make that choice?
Because at night it's dark and I kind of liked the idea of it because darkness sometimes is sad. or horrible in a lot of work sometimes that we read. And so I thought I wanted to bring that forth in a title that all these horrible things touch the darkness, the dark side. Also, I like the sound of it.
It does sound good. How did you choose the book cover?
Well, let me show the picture of it, the book. And the cover is by Natalia, please excuse my pronunciation, Hermanskaya. She's from Moldova. And when Crimea happened, she was there and she took numerous pictures. And one of my authors, Zveti Naham, who lives in Bulgaria, gave me her name and she sent me pictures. For his book, I used many of them in a book trailer. And I asked if she had any more, and she sent me some pictures. And when I saw this one, I knew it was it. I knew it was the cover. So I sent it to my publisher, Ami K from Last Liar Press, and she loved it. So that's how the cover came about. And I'm so grateful to Zvet and Natalia because the cover to me says it all.
Often, when people are writing a book, they notice certain themes emerging over and over. Did you notice any threads or commonalities running through the poems?
Mostly the things that were happening to the people is a common thread. The atrocities is a common thread in the book. I tried to do as much as I could, change it up a little bit with variety. Tried very hard in my work to get away from repetition in that way.
Did you find that you were writing short poems, almost like postcards, or did the length vary at times?
I don't write real short poems and I don't write long poems. Pretty much in the book, 40, 50 lines. I'm not a long poem writer. The poems seem to end naturally for me. I know when it's time to end a poem and not drag it on. So I would say they're not real short, but not real long. So maybe in an average size book, maybe three-fourths of a page usually. Once in a while, you'll find one longer.
You read those poems, or some of them, in many readings, and I know you've always had a warm reception. What are some of the most surprising or gratifying comments that people have made about the work?
Oh gosh, there's been so many. I should have written them down. The reaction, even in emails, has been just wonderful. It makes me very emotional because I feel like I'm reaching people, and that is the most important thing, for me to do in my writing is to reach people. Some have written, you know, thank you for making them look at things in Ukraine more closely than what they have. Some people said they're going to read more about Ukraine instead of what they hear on the news. They'll investigate it a little more, which was really nice. I couldn't ask for anything better than that. No one has said they would like to get more involved, and I do hope for that, definitely in some way that they could become more involved. Mostly, I get a lot of thank yous for writing about the subject matter that I write about. And that's the atrocities and the things that are horrible that happen in the world. And I get thanked for being a witness.
That's lovely. And I can understand why people would thank you for being a witness, because no matter what subject you write about, you remind us of the humanity of others. You remind us to take a look at people we may overlook because we don't think their stories are anything like ours.
Yes, for sure. Because sometimes when I speak about that blind eye, I want to shake people and say, wake up, look what's going on. So when somebody says something, about my writing that makes me feel great, that they realize what's happening and are listening. They're not turning a blind eye. And that's so important to me.
It's important to all of us because even in this country, there often seems to be a blind eye to what's happening with other groups and some of the struggles that remain. But if people do begin to see again and to see the humanity of others, that can lead to understanding, which can lead to change.
Yes, definitely. I know I've always, wished for peace ever since I was a little girl. And no one in my family really talked, of course, politics, but I think it all started for me with the Cuban Missile Crisis. I remember that so well. And after that, it was like I became involved in paying attention to what was happening around the world, and that has never left me. And to this day, of course, look what I write. I think that's when it all started for me.
That's a great story. How did your love of poetry begin? Because if I remember correctly, you didn't have a great first experience with poetry in school.
No, oh my God. William Blake, Tiger, Tiger, Burning Bright was my first experience of poetry in school. And they just killed that poem. And, it was real rhymey. I don't like rhyme. And they made me not appreciate poetry. And then my mother used to walk around the house reciting Robert Frost and Robert Burns. She loved them. And at that time, I was like, get away from me. I don't want to hear it. And it wasn't until high school I had a wonderful English teacher, and we were studying Keats and Shelley, and that did it for me. After that, I started to love poetry. And then when I got to college, I would bury myself in this old library. And I discovered Matthew Arnold, The Buried Life was one of my favorite poems. And then from there, I discovered writers from other countries and translations, and there wasn't a lot of them back then. And now, of course, it's so much better. But I felt like the Eastern European writers, they made me tick. I felt like I belonged, you know, my writing belonged because I feel like it's more Eastern European than American.
Gloria, thank you for the poems in your book. Thank you for what you have shared here and for the work you have done as a publisher, giving voice to so many people. You have had a far-reaching impact, probably more so than you realize, because in shining the light on darkness, you remind us all of the power and possibility of light.